One significant problem is that few political blocs exist which uphold the entirety of the liberal triangle, where liberal principles have been stuck to at all. There are principally two mainstream liberal blocs: social liberals, progressive liberals, and social democrats on the centre-left, and classical liberals, liberal conservatives, and other market liberals on the centre-right. Illiberal blocs may include communists, socialists, and social justice-style liberal progressives on the left, and fascists, national socialists, and national conservatives on the right. The centre-left's principal flaw is that it attacks market liberalism while trying to extract more government programs from the market through taxation. This can be summarised as the killing of the goose laying the golden egg. Leftists lay regulation upon regulation and cry when things like the post office are privatised. Lately they've also been infected by the illiberal impulses coming from further to the left on social justice. An obsession with equality of outcome rather than equality before the law has took hold of them. Once the champion of women's rights and gay rights, the left now tells us that equality before the law is not enough, and that these victim groups need more rights in order to be raised up to a position of equality. Affirmative action, gender quotas for corporate boards, and an ever-increasing minimum wage. These are economy shredders. The centre-right's principal flaw is that while it correctly perceives competitive markets as an engine of prosperity, it has too great a faith in the ability of markets to keep themselves competitive against oligopolists and monopolists that seek always to expand their power until the market shrinks before business itself. They lack an understanding that the advantage of private property lies in internalising risk, and they therefore fail to see that things that cannot be internalised, such as pollution, damage other people's property by creating global risks in a way that can't be settled with tort law and private compensation. While they understand that welfare payments invoke free riding and mean a high dependency ratio, they're very much stuck in the past with regard to emerging risks to employment in the form of the artificial intelligence revolution that is taking place as we speak, which will, in the fullness of time, require a basic income guarantee to tackle, because it will lead to unavoidable job loss. The centre-right also used to fly the banner of social conservatism, which prevented many people from enjoying liberal freedoms, though nowadays the centre-right, at least in the UK, seems fully on board with the left when it comes to cultural issues, perhaps to the point of illiberalism in the other direction. Both of the mainstream power blocs have failed us on borders, and this is where the effects have been absolutely devastating to the stability of the West. We've been so traumatised by the Nazis that after World War II we not only lashed back against racism, but also liberal freedoms that might just maybe enable someone somewhere to be racist, threatening the very premise of Western civilization. We've cast out basic concepts of statehood because of a false association of borders, which delineate the authority of the state, with fascism and ethnic nationalism. We've gone well beyond equality before the law. Having achieved it, we started to worry that it wasn't enough, that the rights of majorities were threatening to ethnic minorities. In time, this became a poison eroding the very fabric of liberalism. In Rotherham, we saw authorities turn a blind eye to the rape and abuse of little girls by men in Muslim communities, because they feared being called racist. Then we saw them go a step worse, accosting a father when he attempted to take the matter into his own hands and get back his daughter. Equality before the law died on the vine under the Tony Blair government. In 2015, the migrant crisis began. Millions upon millions of mostly young men from the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa went on the move, taking advantage of the crisis in Syria, which I'll add was perpetuated by our desire to force Bashar al-Assad to go, providing weapons to moderate rebels, which quickly ended up in the hands of ISIS and generally making things worse. Migrants in Africa were also able to take advantage of the collapse of southern border control in Libya after Gaddafi was deposed. Faced with this crisis, Europe acted swiftly to oppress its own citizens, arresting people for Facebook posts criticising the government's lack of action on the migrant crisis. By 2016, things got worse yet again. During the New Year's Eve celebrations, when thousands of Middle Eastern men grouped in large gangs kettled women to rob and molest them, in a phenomenon known as Taharush in the Middle East, the response to this was a media cover-up. For you could only hear about it from foreign news outlets like RT, until the pressure on social media grew too great for the mainstream media to ignore. The German government and media tried to put a lid on their own refusal to enforce the law, due to either racist cowardice or active malice, but they failed. Unsurprisingly, this has led to the rise in popularity of far-right elements, as well as a general increase in political polarisation. The two fringe and liberal coalitions of the far-right and far-left are making headway and spreading their tendrils into the mainstream, as the establishment continues to try to destroy the future of the West. The centre may not hold. What is needed to avoid the return of the true Nazis, the bloodthirsty ethno-nationalist racial jihadists, is for the establishment powers to listen to the moderate, liberal, civic nationalists and begin to uphold that third of the liberal triangle they have denied as evil. Borders are not oppression. If we want to help the third world, we're better off helping them where they live, and without bombing them into liberalism, letting them undergo their own cultural development. We need to put an end to the invade the world, invite the world nexus of neoconservatism and progressivism. Some will say that we need immigrants and that immigrants enrich our economy, and it's true that high-skilled, educated immigrants are a boon to any economy. However, most of the economic migrants who come here in large masses are poorly educated and will remain unemployed. This will strain the budgets of the state whether we attempt to train all of them or just keep them on welfare. Some say that since Western birth rates are so low, we have an ageing population leading to a rising dependency ratio that may threaten the solvency of many government programs in decades' time. Maybe so, but the answer isn't importing the third world and just adding to the problem of solvency. Do you perceive among the migrants a significant demographic of budding social workers? So, who will spoon grandma's soup into her mouth in 2060 when there are more retired dependent people than workers to support them? Probably robots. As time goes on, automated technology will both take up the slack caused by rising dependency ratios and necessitate the emergence of some sort of basic income guarantee due to technological unemployment. Far-fetched? So is 2060. Besides, banking on third world migrants to keep the welfare state solvent will not work. Cultures are different. Cultural relativism is wrong. When you import the Middle East, you're importing radical Islam. When you do that, you're setting the stage for conflict. Different cultures can exist peacefully in close proximity, providing that those cultures do not disagree on terminal values. When they do, conflict is a mathematical certainty. On its present course, the future of Europe will either be A. Islamic states or B. fascist states, as a reaction to a Europe that has turned against its own people. If you want anything different, then enforce the borders. It doesn't mean you have to give up liberalism, ban the burqa, and oppress minorities that are already here. In fact, quite the opposite. You get to preserve liberal rights for existing domestic minorities by avoiding the collapse of the West, the very birthplace of liberal ideology. Ironic though it might seem to the tiny-brained, if you want to avoid a right-wing police state, have some borders around your liberalism.